Now when Jung talked about archetypes, it was never clear what he meant, and I think the reason for that was because the archetype is a very complicated idea and a very complicated phenomena, and you can think about it biologically, and you can think about it socially, and you can think about it as something that the individual participates in creating. So it's not that easy to localize it. And as well, it's not that easy to localize it. And as well, Jung was never clear about what the universe of archetypes looked like. At some times he spoke as if they were a relatively small number, and then at other times he spoke as if they were innumerable. And I think the reason for that is, in part, it depends on the level of analysis, right? The more transcendent the archetype, the fewer they are, but they differentiate, because you might say, well, how many hero archetypes are there? And one answer could be one, but they differentiate all the way out into the diverse range of works of fiction that we have. So you could say there's as many variants of the hero archetype, roughly speaking, as there are works of fiction. So you think about it as a hierarchy with the ultimate archetype at the top. So then another question might be, what does the landscape of ultimate archetypes look like? And I think that that's what I tried to lay out, and that's what I'm trying to lay out in this diagram. So now, why do you want to know that? There's a practical reason, or there's a number of practical reasons as well as intellectual reasons. One of the most relevant practical reasons, as far as I'm concerned, is that integrating narratives, and so those would include political narratives, integrating narratives have their force because they draw on universal archetypes. Otherwise they wouldn't have any power, right? Because they're basically stories. Political stories derive their power from the underlying archetypal representations. Obviously, because they have to be concerned with the things that people find important, right? How can you sell a political message to someone if it isn't about something they find important? And if it's important to them, it's going to be grounded at least to some degree in their biological in their biological substructure. I mean, if you're talking to hungry people about food, it's a story that you can tell, right? Because it hooks them deeply. It hooks deep into their motivational systems. To use a narrative of utopia, which is the land of milk and honey, roughly speaking, a very, very old idea, you're also tapping deeply into intrinsic human longings. And so the idea that political narratives incorporate archetypal themes is not really, it's not an idea that I would consider particularly controversial. Putting it that way might be. Okay, so the problem with political narratives, in my estimation, is that they can rapidly transform themselves into ideologies, and ideologies are dangerous for a variety of reasons, but the primary reason for their danger, I think, this is a hypothesis. Is because of their one-sided nature. What happens is that they capitalize, parasitize, I think is even a better way of thinking about it, a profound underlying narrative, but they don't tell the entire story. And so then if you're looking for orientation in the world because you're fragmented and chaotic, and somebody provides you with a partial story, that's going to serve an integrating function. And it's one of the things you see in psychotherapy is that if you're chaotic and confused and you go see a therapist who has a particular kind of practice, Freudian, behavioral, cognitive, Rogerian, whatever, there's a high probability that undergoing that course of therapy is going to be good for you, and that you might even come to view your life in the terms of that therapeutic practice. And you might say, well, why is that therapeutic practice right for you? Maybe it could being Rogerian instead of Freudian, say. And the answer to that is, yeah, well, it probably could have been, because roughly speaking, any coherent ordering principle is better than none. And so that's also a good way to think about human development from an intellectual perspective, is that partly what has to be provided to individuals as they mature into adults is some kind of ordering structure.